Good afternoon and welcome to AIADA's Auto Talk. I'm your host, Rachel Soleimani. Before we get started, a few quick reminders as always. Anyone who has registered for today's program will be receiving a copy by early next week. And if you have any questions, be sure to enter them into the Q&A bar at the lower right-hand side of your interface. Today, we welcome back one of my favorite crews, Bob Grill, Carfax Senior Partner Development Manager, Doug Haddon, Vice President, Field Initiatives at ACV, and Dr. John Coles, Senior Director of Data Science and Analytics at ACV. I know you guys have a lot to get to today, so I'm going to let you take it away.
Well, thank you, Rachel. We, as always, want to thank AIDA for allowing us to do this. It's always a privilege and an honor to do it, and we're certainly excited to be partnered with Doug and John from ACV today. We wanted to share with everyone a couple of changes that the consumers have brought to the table, and a couple of items that will make a big difference when you're marketing your vehicles. So quickly, if we look at just a couple of stats from 2022, the first one's from Hyundai. And Hyundai says that 95% of their transactions actually took place at the showroom. Think about that. 95% actually still happen at the dealership. I know there's a lot of movement, a lot of talk about total online sales, but at the end of the day, the consumer still enjoys going to the dealership. Proof's in the pudding. 95% of their purchases still happen at the dealership. The second one is interesting. The second one is from Google, okay, from Google. And Google says that most reliable searches with the word reliable in it are up 70% in the last 2 years. Look at that, 70%. If something moves 5%, that's an attention grabber, right? But look at that. In the past 2 years, 70% increase in most reliable searches from Google, right? So why is all that? Well, let's take a look at the next one. And the next one will show us that they've added a fifth box. Can you imagine that? A fifth box. We've been doing the Foursquare for, 100 years now, let's say. But the millennial generation, which is now 70% of our traffic, have added that fifth one. So it's no longer good enough for a sale price, my trade amount, what's my down payment, what's my payment. You see, we give them all that now. We've compressed our used car market using market pricing and so forth to be so competitive. We give them all the information on payment and down payment online now. So the conversation, once they get to the dealership, they want that fifth box. And what is that fifth box? Well, the industry is kind of referring to it as future cost, right? Future cost. So what's in it? Let's take a look at the next one. And what they're asking today is that's a good price, but what am I going to have to do to the car after I buy it from you? What am I still going to have to do to it? So where did you get the car? Who owned it before? Was it taken care of? What did you find wrong with it? What did you do to it? Does it come with a warranty? When am I going to have to put brakes? When am I going to have to put tires on it? And where does that price come from? All of these elements are all being put to the table because, again, when a consumer comes to the dealership, and we know they still like to come to the dealership, when they come, this is what they're asking, right? As a matter of fact, if we look at the next one, this is what we need to do today to our inventory when we put it online. You see, a misnomer in the industry is that there's no inventory out there. There's no inventory out there. Well, the truth is there's less inventory at the franchise dealers, but remember, franchise dealers only sold about a third of used vehicles. A third was sold by independent dealers, and a third were always sold by people, selling their vehicle to people. So even though the franchise used car market has got limited inventory in it, the overall amount of inventory is still very strong. In fact, you go to any major metro area and you do a 50-mile an hour or a 50-mile circle from that metro area, you're going to find 40, 50, 60,000 vehicles for sale online to the consumer. So you need to be able to make your vehicle stand out in a crowded space. You need to be able to drive that consumer to your dealership, right? You need to be able to make it stand out. So let's take a look at the next one. And this is from our friends at Cox Automotive. And Cox Automotive says that over 50%, over half your traffic's first point of contact to you is at the dealership. It's not phone, it's not it's not chat, it's not any of the social medias. It's physically at the front door. There you go. 54% is the blue line on used. So when we start putting the pieces together quickly, when we start taking a look at it, consumers want to know, what's it going to cost once I own it? Consumers want to know, where did it come from? What did you find wrong with it? What have you done to it? Those things you have to be able to answer online, or they won't come to your dealership. They don't contact you first. They don't send the email. They don't send the phones. They come to your door. So here's the question. Would you rather 100 leads, or would you rather 10 people at your door? Well, we know the answer to that. The only reason you would want a lead in the first place is to try and get them to the door. You know, when you look at phone and and the closing ratios of phone and you know, they're arguably in the single digits. All dealers want to tell a tale of being at 12, 15, 18%. But the truth is, we've always known the truth, and those closing ratios are at 2 and 4 and 6%, where we know that when they're at the door, we have, at least with fresh walk-in traffic, that 18%, B-backs and so forth at 35. So we know we do business at the door. So again, would you rather 100 leads, or you rather 10 people at the door? Well, let's get them to the door. Let's take a look at how to do that. First thing we need to remember is the first thing we seem to forget. And that is, no two used vehicles are the same. Now, wait a minute. I heard that literally 40 years ago. No two used cars are the same. There's no such thing as a used car factory. Remember that one? Well, here's the thing. When you look at the way we advertise our used cars, when you look at the way we list our used cars, when you look at the way we describe our used cars, we have morphed our used car business into the look and feel of new car business. We list them the same. We take the same photos. Every dealer now has, on average, 27 high-quality photos. We tell the consumer everything they already knew. You can't name a car that doesn't come without power windows, power locks, tilt, cruise, and air conditioning. Yet then, I got a question for you. What's in your description? Oh, wait a minute. It's power windows, power locks, tilt, cruise, and air. And what are your photos of? Oh, wait a minute. That's the power windows, the power locks, the tilt, the cruise, the air. And we give them a window sticker. We give them a list of the standard equipment. So before you know it, when a consumer is looking at our listing, we're not only telling them the same thing 4 and 5 times, we're telling them what they already knew. So what's that lead to? Well, let's take a look at it. What is the most common complaint by online consumers when shopping for a used vehicle? Here's the answer for you. They can't tell the difference. Everybody's beautiful online. Everyone's damn near priced the same based on market pricing. Everyone's taking the same high quality, same photos as everybody else. Everyone's VIN populating the descriptions and giving the same information they can find out anywhere else. Anybody can call a car certified. So stop and think for a minute, trying to challenge you here. If we don't challenge you, we're wasting your time. What is that consumer looking for today? They're looking for, what makes this vehicle unique? Well, as good as it gets is right here. It's called homegrown inventory. It's when you sold the vehicle brand new, sold it, have done all the reconditioning and the maintenance on the vehicle at your dealership. It gets leased, turned in, or traded back in. You do all the reconditioning at your dealership, and now it's for sale as a used vehicle at your dealership. When you've had this vehicle its entire life, that's as good as it gets to the consumer. That's called homegrown inventory. If it's a personal lease vehicle, that makes it even better, because the public perception of a personally leased vehicle is that it's in great condition. because everyone knows the story of someone who leased a vehicle and put as many miles as they wanted on it or kept it in rough condition, and when they turned it back in, they get penalized. So the public perception of a personally leased vehicle is that it's in immaculate condition. And the public perception of a vehicle that has been completely maintained by a dealership is that, again, it is in the best condition. But it only works if you tell them about it. It doesn't do you any good to have a vehicle with this kind of impact if all you're going to do is price it the same as everybody else, list it the same as everybody else, show the same photos as everybody else. You need to set your vehicle apart. In this case, you could ask for the money, but you have to be able to explain why you may be above market. So let's take a look. This is a Carfax history report. Everyone on this call is pretty much familiar with the report. But what do we want to look at in the report? We want to look for that story. We want to look for that quality description. We want to solve for what they're asking for, which is future costs. So as we look at this one, and as we look at the body of the report, you'll see highlighted in green the different service records, right? Because this one has got 10 service history records, and look at that. It's a personal lease vehicle, as good as it gets. So let's take a look at the report. Again, as we go through it, you'll see highlighted in green all the service records from this particular dealership. You see, this particular vehicle is exactly what we described as homegrown inventory. They sold it brand new. They have done all the service and maintenance on it, as you can see highlighted in green. And now it's for sale as a used vehicle in their lot. So what should it read? We're going to leave it on this screen for just a second so that you can read it. I know you're tired of listening to me, so read this for a second. Notice as you're reading it that we're answering the questions consumers are looking for today, and we're doing it in a conversation and not bullet point. Consumers hate bullet point. Have a conversation with the consumer. Remember, the first time you're likely to meet them and have a conversation is at your dealership. So you need to try and have that conversation online before they show up. Have a conversation, answer what they're looking for today, tell the unique elements that add value to their vehicle. Then you can ask all the money and they'll understand why. Okay? Now, whatever it says in that history report should become the description. There's no such thing as a bad car. You just need to be able to explain the vehicle's uniqueness and explain why it's priced the way it's priced. Now, this particular one I'm going to show you is an example that I came across 5 years ago when I was teaching the dealership this very techniques that I'm teaching you. And of course, they want to challenge me. This was a 71-day unit. They had priced $4,000 below market. It was stolen with 2 accidents. Well, guess what? If we look at the report on this one, you'll see a whole lot of yellow. All that yellow are, again, the service history of that vehicle. As a matter of fact, this dealership, this is the 3rd time this vehicle is for sale, and they have maintained it its entire life. Does it have a couple of accidents? Yes, it does. Was it stolen? Yes, it was. But when you start looking at all the unique elements of this vehicle, there's a whole lot more positive than negative. And allow the consumer to make that decision. Find the right buyer online. So how would you describe a vehicle with 2 accidents and stolen? Well, let's take a look. Just made available this beautiful Infiniti QX56. This QX56 first owner personally leased this vehicle. It has always been maintained and taken care of by Infiniti certified mechanics its whole life. It had a minor accident about 6 months after they bought it. The owner had the minor damage repaired, and you're welcome to do a full inspection. We sold it to the second owner, and our Infiniti certified technicians have continued to maintain it. This vehicle is so good, nice looking. It was briefly stolen and had a minor cosmetic damage that we repaired here at our dealership. The customer liked the car so much they kept another full year and traded it in to buy another vehicle from us. We have value priced this Q56 using Carfax history-based value, so don't miss out on this hard-to-find, well-maintained QX56. Now, the truth is, this was a 71-day unit. They had priced $4,000 below market because it was an aged unit. When we rewrote the description for them, we also moved the price where it belonged, $4,000 bump. It sold in 2 days. Now, the truth is, the GM wanted to challenge us a little bit, so they asked the buyer, you know, what made you buy this car? Number one, the buyer was a little confused by the question, but this is what they said. They said, are you kidding me? It's a triple black QX56 priced $1,500 below market. No one's going to know about that stuff, and I'm not telling anybody. What do you mean, why did I buy it? Because you see, even though we bumped it $4,000, it was still $1,500 below market because it did have the 2 accidents and the stolen record. But to the consumer, let the consumer make the difference. Let them make the decision. Let them decide. And it will absolutely impact your business and drive the right behavior and find the right buyer for your vehicle. So with that, I thank you, and I'm turning it over to my partners at ACV.
Bob, I got to tell you, can you guys hear me okay? Are we good?
Yeah, we're good.
I got to tell you, I get going and listening to you, and I get mesmerized by it. And it's not like the first time I've ever heard you, but every time I hear you, it's just like the things that you say make so much sense. And like you, I've been in this industry for about 40 plus years. That makes me old. But things, although they change, they stay the same. You know, having a consumer asking the same questions all these years, but we don't always have the same answer. And I think part of that is, you know, when they're looking at a car, that today dealers, they're buying cars kind of like the consumer is. What do I mean by that? All this talk we've all heard about, I think they call it digital retailing. They call it different things now. Digital retailing. I forget what the last one I just saw was. That I thought, what is that? And I realized, oh, that's digital retailing as well. But the knowing that vehicle starts with knowing the car that you're buying as the dealer. I love the fact that there are cars out there that, you know, I sold that car new. I serviced it at my dealership from day one, and now I'm selling it again. Man, if you can't sell a homegrown car, then you need to get out of the business, because that's the cream puff, the number one selling car that you should have on your lot. But unfortunately, we can't get all those cars out of the service drive. We can't get all those cars that we sold originally. People move, they change, they trade. So what's a dealer do? They need to buy cars from, you know, all the online auctions, all the physical auctions, all the places there are to buy cars. Now, as we know, those things have gotten a little bit harder. There's fewer vehicles out in the marketplace today. So what are some of the things we need to do as dealers to identify those vehicles that have the great stories? Every car has a story. You just got to ask it. But unfortunately, cars can't talk. So what do? How do you ask that? How do you find out the story on that car? Well, obviously, one is what we just looked at, Carfax. But what else is there? How do I know when I'm buying that car besides Carfax? When I'm bidding on that vehicle online, or when I'm standing in the lane trying to buy that? How do I know? Well, let's talk a little bit about the difference between an appraisal and an inspection. I love asking this question. A lot of people go, well, Doug, they're the same thing. No, I don't think they are. I think an appraisal is putting a value on a car, but typically that's based on an inspection. So you really can't have a true appraisal without an inspection. And without an inspection, you won't know the story of that car to be able to tell the consumer that help them figure out what that future cost is. And that said, let me move on. So talk about change. What are some of the things that have changed when it comes to buying those cars that we buy today that we used to buy all in lane? Now we start to buy them, online. And on top of that, not only buying cars online as dealers, but the big thing today is being the first to the driveway of the consumer. What do I mean by that? Well, now consumers have figured out that, hey, dealers want to buy my car. And that's driven by a lot of different things. That's driven by Super Bowl commercials and the day-to-day commercials. Now, look, some dealers, not franchised necessarily, but there are some entities out there that have been doing this for quite some time. And there's some that are really good at it. They've gotten really good at it. And they were ahead of the curve, so to speak. But today, that's top of mind for a dealer that's working hard to fill their used car lot with the right cars for the right money. So it's getting a little more complicated than it was before. Globally, we can now buy cars almost globally. I don't mean across the world, but we can buy them across country. But it brings new challenges. What are some of the things we could do to overcome those? What's some of the tools and tech that we have? Well, let's take a look at some of this stuff. I want to start with this baseline. This is a Car and Driver did a long-term test drive on it was a Subaru of some sort. And they said somewhere down the line, I know 2 or 3 years into the long-term test drive, they said, hey, let's see about this new online valuation. If we want to sell this long-term car, let's go online and see what it is. Now, if you look at some of these bars, this is very interesting. The local dealer, right? So they went to their local Subaru dealer. They went to their online. They found somewhere on their website where they buy cars, and they put in the information that dealer asked for, and it came back quickly with $14,000. Then they went to the My Subaru GTP. So that's a factory, kind of a factory-based help for the dealers to buy cars. They went up a little bit. Then they went to Carvana, and Carvana was even higher. Then True Car higher, Kelley Blue Book Instant Offer higher, Vroom higher, CarMax higher, and of course, they want to see what the private party prices were, and they averaged even more than that. But here's the point: there's that's $5,000 spread top to bottom. Let's take out the private party, because that's actually a retail sale. We don't even want to count that. But we're still $4,000 or $5,000 spread between the local dealer and the highest bid here, which would be CarMax. But here's the thing I want to point out: the local dealer at $14,000, that number. Then we go to True Car. Is True Car a dealer? True Car's not a dealer, but it's up to 16. How can True Car not be a dealer but be at 16? Is Kelley Blue Book a dealer? No, but they're great, but they're not a dealer. How can they bid 17? Because what's happening is that local dealer bid that car at 14 using the technology they have on their current website, but yet they went to other websites and True Car and Kelley Blue Book, and they bid on that same car higher. Why was that? There's other dealers buying for that car. So same car, all these different values, all these different venues. Why is it different? Well, let's talk about this for a second. What do I have to do as a dealer to not be involved in that? I want to drive them to my website. I want to have some kind of a solution, technology and data-driven solution, put the right price on that car, and understand the condition and value of that car better. So what's that look like? Well, I always say that, everybody's like, well, tech's going to take over. Tech's not going to 100% take over. I still truly believe the human asset plus tech plus data, that's where we're not going to miss the value on any car ever. We're going to be right on the money. Some of that tech, I'll start over to the right, that the human can use when they do that inspection, when an actual human is walking around doing that inspection, scan the VIN. The VIN, first thing that pops up on that VIN is a warning. Hey, 95% of vehicles like this vehicle with this VIN, based on the millions of inspections that have already been done, typically 95% of them have difficult start. 85% have a misfire. 66% have an engine. But how is that possible that this technology just told us that? Well, that's based on recordings from vibration and sound from this particular small machine here. It's called Apex, but it's all about machine learning. And here's what happens. Think about this for a second. Today, this isn't the future. This is today. Trying to figure out the story of a car. Well, this little box put in the car, everybody knows what VOC is, right? I didn't until I started looking at this. Volatile organic compounds. Somebody the other day said, Doug, when are you going to have be able to have an inspection that you can scratch and sniff your screen and smell the interior? Well, we don't have that, but we can tell you what that interior smells like. Well, what do you mean? Well, this little box can actually pick up on volatile organic compounds and tell you if it was, I don't know, maybe it was a breakfast burrito left under the back seat for a couple of weeks. Maybe it was a cigar smoker, or maybe it was our friendly pet that we take with us everywhere we go in the car. And there might have been some pet odor in that. Can decipher. The machine is smart enough, based on all the history that it's of those smells, it can tell you what the car smells like. So not only can it tell you what the car smells like, but if we use machine learning for multiple things. And let me see, I'm going to try to, we did this in practice. It didn't work really great. Let me see if I can get this thing to move. What this is, share this tab instead. I can hit this. And guys, I hope this is working because this is cool. If you can see this, this is metadata. And what this is telling us, this is a 3D Reddit of millions and millions of inspections done on vehicles. And if you could see when this comes by and it pops up something, what it's telling you is, hey, this is a whatever year, make, and model. It has a 4-cylinder i4 configuration. It's got 200,000 miles on it. And it's got an engine knock. Now you put millions and millions and millions of those data points together, and it's probably not today, but it's probably not far off either, where you'll someday be able to just pull up to your local auto parts store. They'll be able to throw some kind of a piece of equipment on top of the car or in the car, and they'll be able to tell you just by running the vehicle, listening to it. And guys, this is not an iPhone microphone. This is a set of high definition, purposely built equipment for machine learning and artificial intelligence. But they'll be able to say, hey, these are the parts you need, and this is the repair that needs to be done, all based on nothing more than popping that into the car. So that's based on sound and vibration. But what about visual? How about throwing a small piece of equipment on the ground, driving over it, and having something that comes out like this? It looks like the car was on the lift. Combine the 3,000-4,000 high resolution pictures, stitch them together. This is what it comes up with. What good would it? Think about that for a second. You're trying to buy the vehicle, you're trying to get the story of the vehicle, and you're trying to do this digitally. You're trying to make that digital online purchase. Now you know if there's a catalytic converter issue, oil leaks, rust detection, the visual things that are coming out of machine learning and artificial intelligence are changing our industry daily. The artificial intelligence, we can look at it underneath the car. We put a car up on the rack. The used car tech can put a car up on the rack and take a look at it. Yeah, it's got a little bit of surface rust, but, or is that structural rust? How deep is that rust? Sometimes the combination of that human asset and machine learning, that can be that. So everything that we talk about today is basically using technology to not miss things. I don't know how many cars I've praised as a used car manager, but it was a lot. I had that Kelly Blue Book in my back pocket of my jeans for many years. In fact, I might still have that, one of those pairs of jeans with a little square outline on the back from having that Kelly Blue Book back there. But I could book a car out, tell you what the value, inspect it, and tell you what the value is in seconds. Did I ever miss anything? Did I miss a cracked windshield? Did I miss a cat? I did miss things. Use the technology and use the techniques to not miss things. And if you have a rock solid walk around with a customer for acquiring their vehicles in trade, you have a process to go to their driveway and do the same process to acquire a vehicle directly from the consumer's driveway. Using the technology that's available today, you'll get the right car for the right money every single time, and you won't miss like we miss without. I think that's it for me. I'm going to move on to introduce you to Dr. John Coles. Dr. Coles is going to walk us through, and I'm going to continue to use the PowerPoint. I'm the pointer for the PowerPoint. John, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you give us a little bit of a market update.
Fantastic. Thank you, Doug. And for those of you that I have not met, tremendous to get the opportunity to speak with you. Doug and Bob done a great job of really walking us through some of the current state and the opportunities in technology and pricing in the industry. So what we're looking at here, team, is over the last couple of years, we've been in a weird market. And so as we think about what coming into a new sense of normal looks like, the last few months have not been a helpful indicator. So when we talk about the overall state of the automotive industry and where we are with used retail today, what I wanted to share with you today is changes that we're seeing in the marketplace, looking at the late segment, the late half of 2022 and coming into the early days of 2023. And so I wanted to start with the KPI that some of our colleagues at Black Book put out, and this is used retail days to turn. And what you're seeing is the used retail days to turn over the last 5 years. And when we look at the trends that have changed from 2019 through the beginning of 2023, you'll notice that over the last few months, we've seen the highest used retail days to turn that we ever have, except during the May and June timeframe, immediately after COVID really locked down a lot of our dealer partners. What does this mean? Right now is one of the best times to buy a new used vehicle. Now, that's true in different pockets in different parts of the country, but what's happening is over the last few years, as supply challenges for the manufacturers put us into a supply constrained environment, while the US economy really accelerated, we saw a significant increase in the demand and the activity around used retail and used vehicles generally. And right now, as we come out of the peak wholesale season in that late March, early April peak, we're seeing days on lot for used retail at higher levels. And really what this points to is an affordability opportunity for new vehicles as used vehicles are coming down off of a peak valuation cycle that has been really accelerated due to the supply challenges. And so as those retail vehicles begin to slow the appreciation and actually move towards a more typical depreciation curve, many dealers are realizing that the used inventory that they had is taking longer to move. If we go to the next slide, I wanted to take a step back and talk about inflation. So Doug mentioned his tremendous number of years in the industry. Bob and Doug and many others who've spent decades in the industry have a clear sense of what trends and changes are impacting our dealers really decade to decade and year to year. I, as a newcomer to the industry, and ACV as a newcomer to the overall wholesale ecosystem, we've taken a couple steps back and then also dove right into the real-time nature of data. So first, to take a couple steps back, I was on a panel with Tom Contos, Jonathan Smoke, and Alex Yurchenko talking about some of the trends that mirrored the 1970s and 1940s compared to the 2020s and what we've seen in terms of overall macro conditions that are impacting vehicle affordability and the overall remarketing environment. So on the left, the 1970s were defined by a range of things. You can see the peace symbol there, but when we look at the used and new automotive market, this is when oil, energy, inflation, and really were key driving dynamics of the overall used and new vehicle market. And so as a result, demand for used vehicles actually increased due to the rise in prices in new vehicles. So, and that put additional pressure on used vehicle prices because new vehicle prices were increasing so aggressively in the midst of an inflation cycle. That opened up a wide door for new vehicles that were smaller, and actually Toyota, Volkswagen, Datsun, which later became Nissan, and several other smaller vehicles entered the market to really grab an affordability opportunity in the used and new marketplace. So looking at the 2020s, we've seen a pandemic and fuel and gas supply constraint as well actually accelerate inflation again. And so that combination of fuel and inflation, instead of more efficient vehicles in the 1970s, we're now seeing a shift towards EVs. And so this again is highlighting the affordability challenge for new vehicles as the average price of a new vehicle increases, and that is opening up tremendous space for affordable vehicles to be moved. So when we look at the last few years, we saw a decline in 2020 in new light vehicle volumes, even as the price of new light vehicles increased. And in the tail end of 2022, as we talked about in our most recent earnings call, we saw an increase in volume tick up in the tail end of 2022, and we're seeing sustained growth in that segment through the beginning of Q1 2023. And those new light vehicle volumes open up tremendous volume of used inventory coming in, but also putting pressure on vehicle values in a more credit constrained environment as we go towards the back half of 2023. Next slide. So I looked at where peaks in new vehicle prices changed over time. And the inflation changes we saw in the 1970s are somewhat similar to the more recent inflation changes, but actually the closest peaks and the closest mirrored activity in sudden inflationary changes in new vehicle prices was post-World War II. In 1947, 1948, and 1949 into the early 50s, where we saw sudden spikes followed by a decrease actually in new and used vehicle prices. And so as we see more and more new vehicles come out in a credit constrained environment in the back half of 2023, we anticipate that there will be pressure on the used vehicle value, but also tremendous new activity in new vehicle sales. And with that, I'll finish out with the final slide here in terms of just to bring home this point that during the 1970s, we saw it was a 60 to 70% increase in the cost of a new car, and that put tremendous pressure on franchises and independents to make any way to keep a vehicle affordable for consumers. In addition, franchises were seeing stock newer used vehicles to move something that fits into a consumer's budget, while vehicles that are 5 to 10 years old and older, we're seeing additional pressure on the value of those vehicles in that credit tightened environment. I'll finish with this thought, Doug, and hand it back to the panel. This year is another wild year. Over the last 3 years, we've talked about unprecedented in so many news channels, discussions, and in the used car market. When we look at the back half of this year, we've seen changes in the Fed, we've seen changes in interest rates that are impacting our consumers and dealers, but the opportunity is tremendous for new vehicle volume to enter the market and used vehicle volume to loosen up with significant additional supply through the coming months. With that, I'll hand it back to the panel, and I'm excited to take any questions as well.
Bob, Doug, John, thanks so much for joining us today. The used car super session has become a staple here at AutoTalk, and we really appreciate you all clearing time out of your busy schedules for us. Again, you will all be receiving a copy of this webinar by early next week. We have some exciting programs coming up for you in May, so be on the lookout for promotions. For more information about AIADA, visit aiada.org. Thanks for tuning in and have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Everybody.
Thank you.